Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. The World Bank warned Sunday the world is falling into the first global recession since World War II, as the economic crisis engulfs once booming developing nations, confronting them with massive financial shortfalls that could turn back the clock on poverty reduction by years. The Washington Post reports the bank also cautioned the cost of helping poorer nations in crisis would exceed the current financial resources of multilateral lenders. The World Bank has predicted that the global economy will shrink this year for the first time since the 1940s. The economic crisis is projected to push around 46 million people into poverty this year. In other economic news, the nation's unemployment rate has jumped to 8.1%, the highest since 1983. Employers cut 651,000 jobs in February. 4.4 million jobs have been lost over the past 14 months. In a speech in Columbus, Ohio, Friday, President Obama called the number of lost jobs astounding.
I don't need to tell the people of this state what statistics like this mean, because so many of you have been watching jobs disappear long before this recession hit. And I don't need to tell this graduating class what it's like to know that your job might be next, because up until a few weeks ago, that is precisely the future that this class faced, a future that millions of Americans still face right now. Well, that is not a future I accept for the United States of America.
The number of Americans receiving food stamps reached a record 31.8 million in February, an increase of 700,000 people since January. Food stamp enrollment increased last month in 47 states. Demand has also hit record levels at community food banks. This is Vicki Escara, CEO of Feeding America.
Our donors have stepped up very generously, but the reality is we've not seen a crisis like this since the Great Depression. And so we are in the middle of truly a crisis for average Americans.
In an interview with the New York Times, President Obama admitted the U.S. is not winning the war in Afghanistan. His comment came weeks after he ordered 17,000 more troops to fight as part of an escalation of the 7-year-old war. Obama's also revealed the U.S. is considering reaching out to moderate elements of the Taliban, much as it did with Sunni militias in Iraq. In other news from Washington, President Obama is expected to sign an executive order today overturning the ban on federal funding of embryonic stem cell research. A top Pentagon official said Friday the U.S. military is ready to help Mexico in its deadly war against drug cartels with some of the same counterinsurgency tactics used against militant networks in Iraq and Afghanistan. Navy Admiral Mike Mullen, chair of the U.S. Joint Chiefs of Staff, made the comment after meeting with high-ranking Mexican officials in Mexico City. Mullen said he emphasized the Pentagon's readiness to provide new intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance help, such as unmanned drones to spy on armed drug gangs, especially along the U.S. border. Last week, Defense Secretary Robert Gates said the U.S. military will increase its support of Mexico.
I think we are beginning to be in a position to help the Mexicans more than we have in the past. Some of the old biases against cooperation with between our militaries and so on, I think, are being set aside.
You mean providing military support?
Now, providing them with training, with resources, with reconnaissance and surveillance kinds of capabilities, but just cooperation, including in intelligence.
More than 1,000 people have been killed in Mexico in drug-related violence this year. 6,000 people died last year. Much of the violence has been fueled by the ability of drug cartels to purchase AK-47 assault rifles and other arms in the United States. According to law enforcement officials, 90% of the guns picked up in Mexico from criminal activity are purchased in the U.S. In Phoenix, Arizona, a gun store owner goes on trial today on charges he sold more than 700 weapons to straw buyers, knowing that the firearms were bought on behalf of Mexican drug syndicates. In Iraq, the military has announced 12,000 troops will be leaving over the next 6 months. There are currently about 135,000 U.S. troops in Iraq. On Sunday, 28 people died in Baghdad when a suicide bomber on a motorcycle blew himself up near the city's main police academy. 57 people were injured. In other news from the Middle East, 2 senior U.S. diplomats met with the Syrian foreign minister in Damascus this weekend. The talks mark the first high-level visit by ranking U.S. diplomats to Syria in 4 years. Meanwhile, the British government announced it's agreed to begin talks with Hezbollah in Lebanon. Britain's Foreign Office said the government would authorize carefully selected contacts with the political wing of Hezbollah. In news from Africa, a funeral for the wife of the Zimbabwean Prime Minister, Morgan Tsvangirai, is set to take place Wednesday. Susan Tsvangirai died on Saturday in a car crash that also injured the Prime Minister. The accident occurred less than a month after Tsvangirai was sworn in as Prime Minister as part of a power-sharing file agreement with his longtime rival, Zimbabwe President Robert Mugabe. Officials from Tsvangirai's Movement for Democratic Change say they've seen nothing to suggest foul play. However, they want to carry out their own investigation of the car crash. In other news from Africa, a prominent Kenyan human rights activist and one of his colleagues have been shot dead in Nairobi. Oscar Kamau Kingara was the founder of the respected Oscar Foundation Free Legal Aid Clinic. Last year, the organization published a report accusing the police of torturing or killing more than 8,000 Kenyans. Cyprian Nwamu of the Kenya Human Rights Consortium said, quote, "The human rights community in Kenya holds the government fully and wholly responsible for the assassinations." The Sudanese government is threatening to kick out more foreign aid groups and expel diplomats and peacekeepers days after the International Criminal Court ordered the arrest of the Sudanese President Omar Hassan al-Bashir for committing war crimes. Sudan has already expelled 13 of the largest aid groups operating in Darfur, and Veneman of UNICEF condemned the Sudanese government.
There are millions of people in Darfur who are dependent upon humanitarian assistance for food, for health care, for vaccinations, for education. And the real concern is how to fill a gap when so many of the organizations, probably amounting to a couple of thousand or more people, have had their licenses revoked.
Sudan's ambassador to the United Nations, Abdul Mahmoud Abdul Halim, accused the aid groups of trying to destabilize Sudan.
You should not question the wisdom of our government in doing so. It did not do that haphazardly. We have been working with these organizations for a long time, and we have warned them, we have alerted them not to continue in this path of destabilization, but they chose to continue that.
So it's because they gave information to the ICC.
Not only that, they are doing activities and policies incompatible with their humanitarian mandate. They are messing up everything as far as stability and security of the respective states in Darfur are concerned.
The Guardian newspaper reports a confidential European Union report accuses the Israeli government of using settlement expansion, house demolitions, discriminatory housing policies, and the West Bank separation wall as a way of, quote, actively pursuing the illegal annexation of East Jerusalem. The document says Israel's accelerated its plans for East Jerusalem and is undermining the Palestinian Authority's credibility and weakening support for peace talks. In other news from the region, Palestinian Authority Prime Minister Salam Fayyad has submitted his resignation, paving the way for the possible formation of a Palestinian unity government with Hamas. Representatives of Fatah and Hamas are heading to Cairo today to begin talks aiming at reconciliation and the formation of a unity government. The Israeli Justice Ministries announced Israeli President Moshe Kassav will be charged with raping a woman and other sex crimes committed while he was tourism minister in the 1990s. A group of women have accused him of crimes including rape, sexual assault, and sexual harassment. Tension on the Korean peninsula is intensifying as more than 50,000 U.S. and South Korean troops begin a 12-day military exercise. North Korea's responded by putting its armed forces on full combat readiness. The exercise comes as the North Korean military prepares to test fire a new long-range missile. Earlier today, the North Korean Army said the drills were a military provocation that would only occur on the eve of a war.